Greetings, brothers and sisters. My new favorite song is "Cold Damn Vampires." I think I heard it on the show Reservation Dogs with my wife and I've been watching and we've been enjoying. Talk about that some later video. Um, and it's just there's a lot of music now that's like truther or semi-truther music, and it's a positive. It's a good thing because of just even if it's subtle or even if it's just not as detailed as your opinion might be. It is something where people are more receptive to hearing something like that in the song form. There's another version of it here. And then one of my viewers sent me this, Chris Webby, Raw Thoughts 5. Chris Webby did a good take on the Oliver Anthony song. What he used that as the sort of chorus. And one of my viewers sent me that. And my son had sent me this a while back. I listened to a little bit. It's long, 7 minutes, but it's about the boop and other things like that. But you see this more and more. You saw this with the Oliver Anthony song with all these rappers taking his, part of his song and the chorus of his song and then turning it into some sort of truther type of rap, which you're seeing more and more people are receptive and believing in these ideas. Like people either at least know about them and people have some sense of these things being at least partially true. I mean, I wonder what the real polling data would show you, but I bet it's upwards of 50% of the people are at least on board with some of these truther narratives. I played the Cold Damn Vampire song for my wife, as well as the rap song. Really dislikes country music, but she likes Oliver Anthony stuff, and now this guy. And she also liked the Raw Thoughts rap. She's not a big rap fan, but he did a good job with this Chris Webby. And I think we listened to Raw Thoughts 4, and we were like, my son recommended it. I'm glad that he's listening to this guy who says says a lot of things that we all believe in. But something's happened. Rap is often hostile and insulting and can be kind of graphic. But when we were listening to this, and there's some jokes in it, and it's a good truther rap. I don't like the guy Tom McDonald because I don't like him as a rapper. He's kind of a truther, semi-truther, whatever it is, right? I don't characterize people. If you're just even a partial truther, even a fake truther, at least you understand the narratives. You have to understand the narratives to be able to talk about them. If someone's actually mocking the narratives in a good way, like not the way they do it on mainstream media or the Democrats try to do it, because they don't understand it or they don't want to give it any validity, so they mock it in a deceptive way. But if you mock something in a way that you understand the theory and you understand the people's psychological position, their emotional position, their intellectual position on why they believe what they believe, then something different. But I realize something has happened because you go through different phases as a truther. But there's a period of time where you become, some sort of alternative media truther type person. And you start trying to wake up your loved ones, right? And they try to bring you back from what they consider your insanity and, sort of deprogram you from your conspiracy theorist ways, right? Like there's this period where both people have hope they could win the person back, right? They can win their significant others back. And you go through this process maybe for about 6 months. Some people go through it for years. They're trying to wake up people, and then they realize you can't. Like people have all know what's out there. Pretty much everybody knows what's out there. Very few people haven't heard some or many of these truther theories, and people have taken their position on it. And, there's lurkers are going to be lurkers, and truthers are going to be truthers, and sheeple are going to be sheeple. And you get to a point where you just give up on your loved ones, and they're just lost to you, right? They're lost to you because they're sheeple, or to the sheeple, they're lost to you because they're conspiracy theorists. And sort of the battle lines are drawn. So then it goes from them trying to rescue you to them, like talking boop about you to their family and friends, undermining your relationships, like it's, oh, he's too far gone. They give up on you, and then it almost always turns into some kind of adversarial type situation. And now it's just like they're dead to you. Like all these people, all these sheeple are dead to you. All these conspiracies theorists are dead to the sheeple, and like it's just waiting for things to get real, like in some sort of next level conflict, right? I mean, that's what's happening now. It's like the battle lines have been drawn, and there's no sense of dialogue or winning people over or any thought that there can be some common ground reached. And the things that they've done to us, like we haven't done anything to them because we have no power, right? That all we've done is make them question their reality. We've questioned their integrity. We've questioned their ability to, we've questioned their beliefs and their ability to use critical thinking skills. And we've questioned those things, right? Maybe we've insulted them. I mean, I don't, I guess I may do in my videos, but not on a personal level. But, we've done nothing but words for the most part. Like conspiracy theorists, what they call conspiracy theorists, have done nothing but talk. We're not organized. We're not funded. We're not any of these things, right? The QBs are a little bit different, but, these other groups, but they're not real truthers. But in terms of the truth community, like I said, we have no power and we have no influence over the, system, the laws and the corporations and all of these things. The things they've done to us, I mean, first of all, they've profiled us in a professional way, right? They're talking about us as they're the legitimate source. They're the legitimate, barometers of truth. I mean, that's how they're presented, right? Like what we're disputing about is who is an actual reliable source, who is actually some group or people that we believe are truthful and honest. And even in the truth community, there's lots of debate about that. Either people are not good at analyzing the truth or they're just out and out liars and shills and these other things. But we're arguing about who's the real authority. And they have some illusionary authority, but it is an authority. In fact, YouTube is pushing people to authoritarian news, even though nobody wants to watch it. And so this is the official story. And they have done things so that we can't express ourselves. They've done things with social media. Joe Biden and his cronies have gone to social media and threatened them, and the media has pressured them to restrict our ability to express ourselves. So that's a big violation right there. And then, of course, they made things mandatory that we didn't want to do or take. They have real power in our ability to talk about these things and also in regards to our actions and things like this. And so they might consider themselves the victims because we dare to question their integrity and beliefs and all their stuff, right? But that's all we've done. And sometimes it's not even personal. Sometimes we're just expressing things like I am here, and they're choosing to click on it. It's not that they don't want to hear it. They don't want other people to hear it. And so, like, they're the real douches. I mean, and not that the truth community is great because we're not. The truth community, in large, people suck at the truth community, which I've talked about and documented it before. But in terms of this conflict, they're the ones who have wronged us. We haven't victimized them in any way, even though they whine like they're victims, right? And the stuff that they've done and the position they've taken and the way they've mischaracterized us, there's no going back on that, right? I'm sorry, like there's no forgive and forget in this situation. Like it's never going to be healed, the divide. And I'm talking about people with power and our loved ones and other people. And so there's that. Also, I am sanding and painting my truck. I'm going to sand it. My wife's going to paint it for obvious reason. I've sanded most of the truck, but I realized we had to get the grommets. I'm calling them grommets. I don't know what they're really called, but they're pictured here. This is where they used to be. And I used whatever liquid wrench stuff, that obnoxious, like chemically poisonous, whatever it is, stuff that you spray on rusted bolts and nuts and screws to get them to loosen up, and it just didn't help. I got some of the screws out, but most of them were locked in there. And then I tried to drill the screws out, and that didn't work, and that was going to take me forever. And then I used a grinder that, it just wasn't great either. And I sort of gave up for a while, moved on to other projects. And then I went to work on it today, and I ended up using a crowbar and just popping the things out. It pulled a little bit of the metal out on the truck in some places, which was, I feel like the grinder was already, was at risk of grinding into the truck. I mean, there was no good solution for me. Maybe there was a way to do it, but it was above my ability to do. But anyways, I have these now holes, and some of them are protruding a little bit, and I'm going to pound them down with a hammer unless somebody says something different. And again, if you're not an expert, and I don't mean whether you consider yourself an expert, but whether other people consider you an expert in this kind of work. You've done this work before. And so what I'm looking for is, do I use Bondo on the holes and then sand it again? Like, what should I use to fill these holes? A few of my viewers, one of them reached out to me on Instagram, let me know about a product that changes rust into a paintable surface, and I'm going to use some of that paint, so that was a good thing. And, I've sanded most of the truck, and like I said, now I just got to figure out these holes on the sides, the body of the bed, and then I got a little bit more sanding to do on the tailgate and the cab. But most of the rust is on the body of the bed, and I got most of it off. And it's a nice smooth surface now. I'm going to use some of that paint where I couldn't get the rust off. Some of the places like on the bottom of the bed, there's some bits of rust that I just can't sand down far enough. But in terms of using Bondo or any of these things, anything anybody has any knowledge of this, let me know what you think I should do here. That would be appreciated. So my wife just sent me this. This is Jojo Magoo.
Sir, not that they're asking you, what's your advice to the next House Speaker? Thank you, sir.
Did he say my butt's been wiped? I think he said my butt's been wiped, or needs to be. One of the things. Something about his butt. What they're saying he actually said was, that's above my pay grade. He's not going to make it. I mean, he's deteriorating right in front of our eyes. Okay, so this is John Kirby. I assume he's one of the neocons.
I wanted to ask about, you all have been saying that there is bipartisan support in Congress, which there certainly is for the Ukraine funding. But if you look at broader public opinion support, it has diminished from the point of when this war started. Some polls showing that a majority of Americans do not support continued funding for Ukraine. And so I'm wondering what your message is to that growing segment of the public, and if you have concerns about that diminishing support over time amongst the American public.
I can't speak to individual polls.
Because they don't care what people think, right? People are incapable of doing anything to stop them, right? And so they don't care.
And certainly the American people should speak for themselves.
Should they? Because you're trying to stop us from doing that on social media.
We believe that Americans understand what's at stake here. We believe.
Yeah, not in terms of us believing in your ability to do the right thing, right? So I don't think Americans actually think this is a good war. And we know now. I mean, it's, something where they can sell you something for a little bit, but at some point you realize they're just spending your tax dollars on something that has no benefit for you and is failing.
I believe that Americans understand that it's not, although it is first and foremost about Ukraine and the Ukrainian people and their sovereignty, it is
it's all about them.
Than that. The American people understand that there's more at stake here than just the borders of Ukraine.
Okay, so are you speaking for all of us? Because I don't understand it. I mean, I understand that you're lying. I understand that you're a deceiver. I understand that you're a failure. I understand that your president is senile.
The vast security environment on the European continent. And it's the very idea of independence.
It's just a very idea. It is. It is, Skippy. It is. It's the very idea of independence. It's inspirational.
which is a founding ideal in this country. If there's one thing that all Americans, no matter who you vote for, can get behind, it's the idea of independence.
Yeah, independence. That we just go spend your money without you, whether you signing off on it. We do things without you approving of them. It's independence. You guys are so independent. Take your bloop.
That's what Ukraine's fighting for. Their right to be an independent state. It's what we fought for in 1776. And most Americans will also know and remember that we didn't win and secure our independence without foreign help from abroad.
Exactly. We needed it when we did it in 1776. So we should pay it forward.
That's all Ukraine's asking for. They're just asking for foreign help and assistance to do this fight.
That's all. The rest, like, it's billions.
And they're the ones doing this fighting. So we're going to continue to make the case. We're going to continue to make it clear to Congress and to the American people what we're doing and why we're doing it. But there is so much more at stake here.
There's just so much more.
Then there was this as well.
Forces are outgunned, taking heavy losses. Thank you. So we've heard testimony from wounded Ukrainian soldiers who suggest that Ukrainian forces are outgunned, they're taking heavy losses, and they have no way of cracking heavy Russian defenses even at this current level of U.S. aid. So if U.S. support is significantly reduced, can Ukraine still defend itself? And is there a real risk here that Russia can retake its initiative in the war?
Well, I mean, to be blunt, the answer to your first question is no, and the answer to your second question is yes. I mean, it is very important that Ukraine continue to get the support it needs on the battlefield. I can't speak for battlefield conditions in any one area.
Yeah, because if we knew that we know we were just throwing money away for the military-industrial complex. We're just giving them weapons and things so we can buy new ones. And, throwing things away because they're going to lose. They're getting hammered. It's over. They've already lost. So I can't really talk about that. Because, you guys wouldn't want to give more money if you knew that there's no chance for victory and that we failed and we overestimated what we were going to be able to do here.
And how much ammunition they have. But we know that the counteroffensive has not gone as far or as fast as even the Ukrainians want it to. It's still a violent fight on two major lines of axes, one in the Donbass area and one down south of Zaporizhia. And they're still fighting it out every single day. And it's why I said in my opening statement, time is not our friend. We've got 6 to 8 more weeks of good weather here before things really make it hard for both sides, quite frankly, to fight. We want to make sure that we take advantage of that. And as I said earlier to Jeff, and I think to Peter's question, any lapse in the funding is going to be unhelpful to Ukraine.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, of course, because they're already getting hammered. They've already lost. They've lost. It's over.
Thanks a lot, Kareem. John, you said earlier in response to a question that there are 50 countries that are assisting Ukraine in their fight against Russia. Why can't Ukraine make do with just that support? Why is it necessary for the U.S. to also be a part of this military, economic, and humanitarian aid?
Well, there's a lot there. First of all,
Because we're making up 90% of it.
there's incredible convening power by the United States.
Because Kakistan gave them like a yak, and and there's been other countries. Look at this guy right here. Look at him. You trust this guy right here? Look at those frickin' deer in the headlight eyes.
And it's hard to see that there would be that level of international support so widespread. And it's well beyond Europe, man. We're talking about countries in the Indo-Pacific region.
Man, we're talking about, you don't even know, man. Let's do some shrooms, man.
So this guy, had a couple of bad days.
No. No. Look, unequivocally no. If you want to categorize this, let me see, because some people think some big side deal. I did tell when we were doing the stopgap measure, there was a concern in there, does it have transferability on money? I believed and my staff believed it did, but what I did say to the White House, if it does not, if you think some way it doesn't do it the way you would, I will fix that. I did say that, and I did say I do it. Look, I support arming Ukraine. That doesn't mean sending them cash, but arming Ukraine. But I have been on the White House even before they sent this supplemental. I said, you guys are...
Okay, see you, Kevin. Nice knowing you.
As we have some breaking news out of New York City. There's been breaking news in the case against Donald Trump, the fraud case. And this is Judge Arthur Engoron, who Donald Trump has been going after outside of the courtroom, has now put a gag order on all parties in the case, a specific gag order, though, regarding posting or publicly speaking about any member of his staff. This follows a Truth Social post from Donald Trump earlier today naming the judge's clerk and claiming that she shouldn't be in that position because she was friendly with Chuck Schumer. There was a picture of the two of them together. Joining us now is NBC News correspondent.
So, this is a punk move on his part because he has all these crazy supporters and he's putting some, woman in life in jeopardy. He ended up having to apologize and retract the post. But he's really triggered about this thing, the fraud, because, he's a fraudster. Like more than the other court cases that are felonies that could result in jail time. He's more upset about this one because it exposes him as a fraud.
Correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, who's outside the courthouse, and former FBI General Counsel Andrew Weissman, and NBC News legal analyst. So, Vaughn, I very briefly touched on what happened, but please do explain what led to this gag order.
Right, I just ran out of the courtroom where this trial
Did you run? Did you physically? Are you OJ?
is beginning again here this afternoon in Lower Manhattan, and that principal law clerk of the judge continues to sit next to him about 3 feet away and about 10 feet away from Donald Trump, who remains in the courtroom this afternoon. This began in around the 11 a.m. hour during one of the courtroom breaks when Donald Trump posted on his so-called Truth social media account a photo of this principal law clerk with Chuck Schumer and suggested that she was Chuck Schumer's girlfriend. There is nothing to suggest, let's be very clear.
He can't help himself. Like, it's funny what he did there, but he just can't help himself because this is just aggravating the judge and the legal system and the people that are responsible for the ruling to a bunch of dopes, a bunch of Trump supporters out there that, what are they going to do, right? Other than harass this woman, right? For pose with I can't endorse anybody who would pose with a picture with Chuck Schumer. He's one of the biggest creeps out there. But, this is just stupid on Trump's part.
That the principal law clerk is a girlfriend of Chuck Schumer. This was an image that was taken from her Instagram account. Of course, Chuck Schumer is the senator of New York, and there is...
All right, so, this is going on in Trump land. So I covered this briefly on my other channel yesterday. Senator Dianne Feinstein's death leaves her daughters wrangling over breathtaking $102 million property fortune and $62 million private jet she used on her mansion. Her net worth is over $160 million, and she made $6 million in salary, which isn't a bad amount, right? $6 million. I mean, most people, if they said, all right, in your career after you retire, you're going to amass $6 million worth of income. That you would live fairly well on that. You'd be, you would be a millionaire. You'd have a nice house and you'd have everything you need, right? You could eat the foods you want. I mean, it's, $6 million is a lot of money. And, maybe she could have had another 4 in some related things or whatever, investments, whatever it is. But 160, that's criminal behavior. Like, there's no other explanation. If you're a person in power, that means you've sold out, right? Obviously. And she was the second highest valued senator. But, this is what happens when you're corrupt, and all these politicians are doing this across the board. This is what they all do. Regardless of any other things that we're talking about here, this is what they do. And because of that, they're all suspect, right? Okay, so my wife brought this to my attention yesterday. The problem with Kennedy being a third-party candidate, the dangerous illusion of a presidential third-party candidate in 2024, is that this idea that this website 270 to win, that if you don't get 270 electoral votes, which is more than half of the country. That's more than 50% of the electoral votes, right? So what would happen is this would go to the Senate. Of course, they have the tie-breaking vote there if they have a tie with Kamala for Jojo Magoo. If no candidate receives the majority of electoral votes, the vote goes to the House of Representatives, which right now is run by the Republicans. But you understand this, if Kennedy would have any legitimate support, and he has at least 20% support now, and 18 to 20%, and that is before this is really becomes real. And as it moves forward, he could get 40% of the vote or something and still not be president because of the voting be the Republicans would vote for a Republican, Democrats would vote for Democrats. It's who's in control of what branches of the legislature, either Congress or the Senate, because both have a role in this thing. It would be an absolute mess, which I'd be glad to see. So here it is here. A third-party candidate would have a lot of problems getting to 270. We just wouldn't. And if there's three-party candidates here, there's almost impossible for them to, amass enough electoral votes because it's divided by three. They would have to get over 50%, and the other two would have to split like 20 whatever percent that is. And so with a third-party candidate, this is definitely not going to be a clean election because the two candidates are not making it that you have to get half the electorates makes third parties irrelevant. I wonder, we had a third-party candidate in Ross Perot, and so I wonder how that was. Let me look into that. So Ross Perot got 19 million popular votes, but none of those didn't win any states. There are some states that divide up the electoral votes, and I don't know what states those are. But he didn't win any electoral votes, so this wasn't put to a test. But I would assume Kennedy is going to win some states. And, that's where it'll affect the outcome of the election, where this election will not be clean, which, it'll be a mess, which will, I don't know, just expose things. I mean, I'm all for it, but the chance of Kennedy winning is almost non-existent. That's why he didn't opt for this in the first place, because they've rigged this to be a two-party race by making you have to win half, because, it's hard to win half in a three-party system. That's why they've made it this way, because they want a binary system. They want to control two parties. You get a third party, it's hard to control. There needs to be consensus, and the way they have it in some of these other countries where the public is more involved, like they have it in England and these, it's more of a mess, and less things can get done because it's harder for them to get a consensus. They have to work out all these complex deals, but also it's harder for them to be corrupt because of all the, the changing elements in a three-party system. There should be really four. There should be an extreme right and extreme left. And then there should be the two centrist Republican and Democrats, because that's how it is, right? That's how it is right now, that the parties are divided amongst moderates and extremists. And so there should be a four-party system, and it would, probably be better in one way or another. I mean, right now we're so screwed, none of this stuff matters. It's all about the show at this point. It's all about what happens, what gets exposed, all of those things. Okay, so I did a little bit more research on this Donald Trump thing, because it just sucks. This is a stupid Truth Social thing. This isn't truth. Schumer's girlfriend, Allison R. Greenfield, again, this is him putting out her name. We don't know if this person's a bad person. I mean, we know he is, right? But we don't know who she is. She looks, maybe she's got some dietary issues, but whatever. She's a young woman, and she's now been named by Trump with all of his crazy followers, right, to harass on the internet and all these things, right? Just because she ends up being, it says here, Schumer's girlfriend, Allison R. Greenfield, is running this case against me. How disgraceful. This case should be dismissed immediately. Again, not going to help him in terms of what's happening with the court, but it will inflame his stupid followers. And this is somebody else posted. Why is Judge Irgangaran's principal law clerk, Allison R. Greenfield, palling around with Chuck Schumer? she got this photo op done. Maybe she was at a party he was at or an event. You know, I mean, she has a job in sort of semi-influential job in the court system in New York, and she's probably doesn't like Trump, and she, you know, this creepy MFer here, but this doesn't help Trump at all. You know, he ends up getting, you know, this just fuels all the liberal media against him, and you know, this is not incriminating. This is, you know, just a photo op that she did on her Instagram page, right? She posted this one photo. They're clearly not dating. I mean, this guy, you know, look at this creepy guy, right? And she's just some, whatever. Like, it's possible they could be dating in some Bill Clinton-like way. But you could say the same with Trump and all the pictures Trump has with young women, where there's thousands of them, that Trump has pictures of him with young women, and Trump was banging a lot of them, right? And, you know, so this is just Trump doing something stupid, sabotaging, crying like a baby, just being an immature little kid. You know, the little kid who never grew up. I got a little voiceover I already did. I'm going to go to that now. Okay, so I did a voiceover that's going to follow this earlier today. It's still Wednesday, October 4th. This video is coming out tomorrow. And I'm going to add a little bit of whatever it is to the end of the video about Trump and his stupid accusation of this you know, paralegal that she's somehow having an affair with Chuck Schumer because they have one picture up on Instagram together. You know, and it's just Trump lies and he lies to dumb people, you know, the people that follow him. And, you know, this is for his audience so he can get sympathy for them. And, you know, he's feeding off of his supporters who look at the alternatives of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and, you know, see all the ways that Trump has convinced them he's been victimized and they've been victimized and he's their only hope and whatever it is. And I was watching a little bit of the movie Deep Impact with my wife. I don't think I've ever seen it before. It's an extinction level comet event like Armageddon, you know, and it's just kind of goofy and, you know, one of these old poorly done disaster movies. But when you look at our so-called leaders and these people are at the top, whether it be Elon Musk or any of the people in the news business or any of the famous celebrities, like these are the people that, you know, are famous and they're supposed to be people who have achieved success. And then you have just the ordinary schmoes at Walmart and people sticking cancer sticks and, you know, like, and, you know, heart disease chicken McFuckets and these things down their ghoul holes. And at what point do you get it that there's nothing really here to save? I mean, there's, you know, some good people, but we're all degraded, like the whole system, the whole population. People used to be better. People used to be, you know, more than what we are now. And some of us, you know, we see these other people and we're like, oh, well, at least I'm better than that guy. Yeah, but that guy's kids are eating out of a dog bowl or cat bowl because they're saying they identify as cats. And, you know, I mean, this is what you're comparing yourself to. There's no grading yourself on a curve here. Our whole society is degraded. There's nothing to save, right? There's nothing to save, right? I mean, people are, you know, degraded. We've gone down a ungodly and unnatural path following this demonic system of our own creation. You know, Trump being so petty and posting something like this and then getting reprimanded by the court and then, you know, talking about how it's so unfair and all these things, right? Pissing off the judge, you know, the person that's got all this power over his existence right now. For no reason, like just stupid stuff that has no bearing on the decision or the outcome of the case. And really, he's unlikable. Like, to the Trumpers, he's their last hope, but to the rest of us, he's become more and more unlikable, pathetic. You know, these narcissists, these people who suck off their followers and, you know, they're vampires and preying on the, you know, the weak-minded and people to support them and, you know, steal their money and raise money instead of for his campaign and then use it to pay his legal expenses and things like this. Just an out-and-out scumbag, a flim-flam man. And then you got all these so-called candidates, and none of them are are worth a thing. None of them are, people that you'd even want to hang out with and have a conversation with. Never mind have them lead, the alleged most powerful country in the world. And you say, all right, they're all actors and they're all just performers, but that's the performance they're giving you, right? Let's say these guys are all in on it and they're all performing for you. And the performance they give you is this. This is your leaders. This is the leaders that they think you want to see and you deserve. This level of leadership, right? This level of degradation. All the great civilizations end, even if they're noble and they're based in spirituality, and the people are, they have a sense of duty and honor, and there's just, the people are better, and the civilization aligns itself with the divine forces. Things have to change. Things evolve. Things happen. The earth goes through cycles. Sometimes there's a depopulation cycle. Sometimes, you think about the lost civilization of Atlantis and things like that. Well, that just happened because there was a massive, there's an ice age when that civilization was there, and then the ice melted and the civilization went underwater. There's nothing they could do it. They built a big civilization, big cities by the coast, and the coast was underwater, right? There's all these civilizations that were underwater. There's a place out in the New Mexico desert somewhere where I lived before, and it used to be under the ocean. You tried to dig there, and the ground's hard as a rock because the sea had, years and years ago had compressed it, right? Like there was just all this water pressure on it, and then there was more ice caps, and the sea retracted. This happened, there's all this landmass that used to be civilized. It's underwater, and you can find these ancient ruins all over the world. The tectonic plates shift, volcanoes, earthquakes, whatever it is. There's things that just happen. Meteors hit, comets hit, wars, whatever it is, nuclear wars, whatever's going to happen. These things end, and they've had, over the centuries, there's been various great civilizations that have been lost because of it. And our civilization is, there's just become idiocracy. It's a ridiculous place. And people are only able to survive based on how much the system does for them to keep them going. Their, dependence on the system and their entitlements and their weaknesses and their physical and emotional and psychological weaknesses. They have one specialized skill that they can perform and, be a part of the system until they're no longer needed, and then they can't survive. They're not capable of shifting, adapting. All the people in mental institutions, all the people that are sucking off of other people, that are glomming onto other people for sustenance because they can't, physically and mentally endure what it takes to survive in the world as a natural human being, and that's pretty much everybody. What it would be like if the system wasn't there. What it would take to feed yourself and survive and live in nature and, deal with the hot summer nights and the cold winter nights and the changes in climate and all of it. And so, it's just a matter of time. Like we know what's going to happen and what should happen. We can all see it. Like everything that I report on a daily basis, and all the disaster movies and post and pre-apocalyptic movies and things like that. We know what's happening here, right? People don't want to admit it, but, oh, this guy's going to save us or that's going to save us. Come on. And what is there to save, right? Like, what are you saving exactly? Anyways, here's my other voiceover. Okay, so I just took a little bit nap and went for a walk with my dogs. This is the October 4th. I've edited up to about a half hour into this video, 28 minutes and 38 seconds the day before. And that's great because I can release these videos in the morning. I can be ahead of the game. It's working out great. This new format that I'm doing where I'm making shorter videos, pretty much daily on my Apocalypse Now, but I can always take a day off. It's working out great for me. Like, I felt the need maybe to reduce the amount of content I'm putting out because people can't keep up with it. That's another reason. But it's good for me to be ahead of the game, especially on that channel where some of my videos are being yellowed, and now that seems to have gone away with the shorter videos. But if they get yellowed, it's no big deal because I've only spent 20 minutes on. I can just release it later. It's not ideal, but it's still better than it was. I just watched Chris Webby's Raw Thoughts 6 video. I watched the 5th one today, and then the 6th one got recommended to me. And, I think I heard the song before. I didn't like it as much as the 5th one, and there's a lot of talking involved. It's like a 9-minute video. And he doesn't get to the truther stuff till the end of the rap song. And, that's kind of interesting, that part of it. But what was interesting to me was that he used the metaphor of zombies, like a zombie apocalypse in terms of the war between the truthers and the, sheeple. And kind of interesting way to see it out there, because it's something we experience, not so much on it's like a zombie level kind of war that we're dealing with here, like I said at the beginning of the video, where, there's no, there's two distinct groups, and it's a different level of consciousness. But getting back to what I was saying about this new format, I just released a 5-hour video on the Journey series for members, and I'm already an hour into a new one that's kind of picking up where I left off. I was hoping to move on because of the big stuff that happened at Dodgy's birthday and how he, just crapped all over Chargy's legacy again, for those of you who are watching my Journey series videos. And I got a comment on, I did a transmission, there's a, experiment where people could experiment and feel the transmission on a video here yesterday. And I only got a few responses from people who tried it. I don't know if people didn't make it into the video that long, or they didn't bother trying it. I don't know, because it was at the end of the video, which is what this is, because, some people just watch a little bit of the video, whatever. Very few people make it to the end. In terms of the views, it's probably 1 out of 10. I don't know. I don't know what the ratio is. So for that reason, some people like the longer videos, some people like the shorter videos, but, I'll make the longer videos for those people who want to listen to more, or have more time or whatever. Anyways, I had this experiment, and then I put the whole thing up on my Gratefulness meditation, not the whole thing up. I used the experiment as a standalone video where people could experience a transmission, and I got a lot of people who had a positive response to it. This isn't just for people who haven't tried it, because transmission's transmission, and when you can get it, get it, right? It's like a rare gift, and we're lucky that it's available. But there was one person that wrote a comment, and I didn't want to start making comments on my gratefulness meditation, because, it's only for people doing gratefulness meditation, or people are interested in the spiritual aspect of what I'm doing here, right? If you want to watch the videos, fine, but it's all about gratefulness meditation. And so this person wrote, now this is to an experiment where people are being able to experiment with transmission. And so the person writes, you don't need a transmitter or transmission to know God. In fact, that confuses the entire thing. It confuses internal and external. There's no group meditation, only individuals trying to meditate in a group. Such delusions are paramount in the Kali Yuga. So this is some expert, right? Like some expert who's come into a video about transmission and somehow find their way onto my Gratefulness Meditation channel and telling me and everybody what's up, right? Which is the sign of a not evolved person. Like if you're a spiritually evolved person, you wouldn't do this. For example, there are things that are being done on a lower level for people who can't do what we're doing here in the meditation. People who can't do spirituality. There's lots of religious people, and religion's all they can do. I would never go to their channels or their churches or whatever they're doing and tell them there's something better, because that would be mean and it would be counterproductive, because they couldn't do the other thing anyway. You have to be, have some sense of etiquette. I talk about it here because this is my channel. This is what I believe. This is what I do. This is, this is my little part of the internet. It's a small little part of the internet that's not like most of the rest of the internet. And I get to express myself here and talk about what I do. But I don't say that to people in their own place. I don't go to their place and proselytize and tell them what they're doing is wrong, how much better I am and how much more evolved I am than them, because that would be narcissistic and it would show like a lower level of evolution. But this person's doing this because they think they've made it somehow. Let me read the rest of the comment here. And there's a comment I didn't save that I wanted to address as well. And so some person wrote back, I take it you didn't feel anything. And the person said, on the contrary, whenever I put in serious effort, I can open up the heart to some degree and bask in bliss, regardless of whether a YouTube video, something external, is playing in the background. Direct experience is how you know whether the external middleman transmissions are not legit or not. The thing is that those of us who can feel transmission knows this person's full of boop, right? And it's not because you can't feel God's love, because you can feel love in your heart. You feel love. People feel love. Not everybody does feel love, unfortunately, but those of us who have felt love for other people, or just felt love, or felt bliss, or some of these spiritual conditions, we felt it. You can feel those things. You can feel those things without any external stimulation or input. And by the way, transmission isn't really an external thing, which is odd to say, but it is not, it's not in the video. Like I said, it's not made of the material world. And God is there everywhere. God is in us and God is there everywhere. But people are not good at connecting with God. And people's egos are, if you have a little bit of God or have a little bit of bliss like this person claims to, they think they've made it. And that's another problem. People will get on the spiritual field and they'll come to a spiritual condition or point on the spiritual journey that's blissful, and they will stop. They will stop evolving because they think they've made it. They've had some experience that will lead them to believe they found God, and that's it. There's no further journey ahead of them. They've completed their goal, and that's all there is. But the journey never ends. And that's kind of the great part and the sucky part of it. The ways of God will never be completely known, and there's always something more to discover, which sounds exhausting to people, but it's not. The energy is always going to be there for the journey if you embrace it. So it's never like you've made it, like this person's like claiming they've made it. And dismissing something that we're doing here, again, you can dismiss it all he wants. Anybody can. I had another commenter who came in and heard about what happened with Heartfulness, I guess from some third party. I don't know. I was a little unsure because the comment was so poorly written. But the person, and now I regret not saving the comment, but at the time I wasn't, I was just moving through the comments. But the person basically said that what happened with Heartfulness is we were meditating on one guy, and then another guy came in, which was dodgy. We were meditating on Chargy, and another guy came in, and he wrecked the whole thing. And why did we need someone to wreck the whole thing? And basically said similar things to this other person, right? That God is inside you and you don't need anybody else. He was more about self-love, like this kind of stuff, right? But didn't know anything about it, never heard anything from me, didn't get the whole Journey series story, just as coming in complete ignorance and telling everybody what's up, right? You got all kinds of dopes like this that think they know and they don't, right? You can just, you can feel it, and you can, when you contact their thinking process. And the transmission is there, and it's not the best way to feel it, but this 10-minute one was better than the first one. It was better than the first one I did that day, and I didn't have the record button on, which is weird because it wasn't being recorded. But I didn't know how long it would last, and so I did it again. The second one was better than the first one. There's transmission in the first one, but it was like more refined in the second one. And then the one I did on my other channel, the Apocalypse Now, that was sort of impromptu, but people still felt it. And when you feel transmission, it is, something wonderful. And it really can't be described because you're experiencing something that's on another level. And what's being offered in the Sajmark system, and what we're doing now with Gratefullness, is that there had been a discovery and a breakthrough of spiritual evolution on a human level that hadn't been achieved here before. And the ability to, reach this place and then transmit from that place, which is called the central region, and be able to do it all the time, like not just once. Well, people hadn't reached the central region before. This was something that hadn't been done in human spiritual evolution. and being able to transmit from that place gives you experience of what it'll feel like when you reach your spiritual goal, right? And people have, like I said, haven't gone anywhere spiritually. My wife and I watched a few Native American shows. We're watching them. We were watching this show called The Reservation Dogs, and we just completed another show we watched on HBO, which was a really good show. And there's crossover of cast members. We notice this with like English TV shows and movies. You'll see the same actors over and over again in English TV shows and movies. Like they only have a limited supply of actors over there, that are in movies and TV shows. The same thing with like these Native American shows. There are characters in both of them, and they were both really good shows. One was a like more serious crime drama, and the other one was more of a comedy coming of age story. But both of them were really good. The other show was called Dark Winds. I've always had an interest and felt a connection to the Native Americans, of course, the Druids and these other things to do with, doing what we're doing now in terms of homesteading and village-based living and these kind of, what are considered primitive cultures, Aboriginal cultures. And the people that lived that way were living in a more organic human way. Aboriginal cultures, village-based cultures, like these, more primitive societies, but people were more human and more evolved in various ways. But they weren't evolving spiritually. They weren't moving forward on their spiritual yatra. They were living as natural, organic people. They were intercommuning with nature, connecting with, animal life, but they weren't moving along on their spiritual journey. And that's one of the reasons those cultures have been absorbed, even in a kind of brutal way, by a less evolved, more selfish, narcissistic, warlike cultures that are obsessed with the material world and technological development. And, that has its own issues, obviously, with people evolving spiritually. But the majority of people are not evolving. They're stuck and going backwards, not just stuck, but going backwards. They're going away and making it harder for them to connect with God. You can connect with God. God's inside of you. But why haven't you? And these people who say, I have, look at me, I'm great on the comment section. They haven't either. Like, whatever they've connected with, that's too ego-based, right? Their self-expression of it is ego-based. A person who connects with God doesn't brag about it, right? Like, it's like when you dive into the ocean and the ocean's waves knock you around like you're a little nothing. No matter how big and strong you are, the power of the ocean and the vastness of the ocean, right? It's humbling. And when you connect to God, it's humbling. It makes you realize I don't want to say insignificance, because we're all part of it. We're all part of the process. But, it makes you understand the vastness of God and the universe and all these things. But if you think about the amount of godly people there are, people that you really know to be spiritual, not religious who claim to be, spiritual, but they're kind of jerks about it. They're using religion as a weapon to show how superior they are to other people and talking down to other people, whatever. In a religious way. Like people who are actually connected with God and, they radiate something. They have something going on that the majority of people don't. It's a few people. You might not know anybody like that. So people are failing on a spiritual level. And it's not just a Kali Yuga thing, because it's happened in all yugas. People have not evolved spiritually. Very few people move at all along their spiritual journey here. And that's a goal of your soul for creating your body in the first place, is to move along your spiritual journey. And people just aren't doing it. And that's why Sajmarg exists, because of the transmission, and the cleaning helps people get jump-started and move them along, because it's like a necessity right now. The failure of our inability to utilize this simulation that we have out here on Earth to move forward spiritually, and the destructive element that we're conducting here on this simulation that can affect not just this, the three-dimensional world, but spiritual worlds as well, has created a need to move people along and, give them a huge boost, like shortcuts. And that's what the transmission and cleaning represents in the Sajmarg system, what we do in Gratefullness. And I've experienced it. And sadly, I know all these people who are more evolved than the average people. People who have been saints in past lives, people who have, something a little bit more coming in than other people do. who have done Sagemarg and now Heartfulness, and they just suck. Like, I mean, with all the evolution they've given and they've been brought to higher levels, you're limited by self-effort, right? Whatever, blocks there are to people's spirituality and their material attachments, self-effort is limited. You can connect to God, but it's slow going, and it's you doing it for lifetimes and moving along slowly. But this system gives people a jump start and helps to clean away, vast amount of grossness from past experiences, some scars, and then boost them into these higher levels of consciousness. And even with that, people dive back down. They were put in the mind region. They fall out of the mind region, go back to the heart region, back to their, original where they were originally. They tumble and spiritually fall. And this has happened to saints, famous people, famous beings, Jesus even. This is just what happens. People, because of their egos, because of the maybe the notoriety, the power, the influence they have over other people, or they just get overwhelmed by the masses and the people that they're trying to help, and the suckiness on planet Earth, or they get lost in the illusion and the pleasure of Earth, or whatever it is. They tumble, and it's unfortunate, but that's what human beings do. And so all you can do is get back up and go after it again, right? And learn, hopefully, and do better the next time. But there's not a lot of hope for humans because of this. There's just a tendency to dive down to the lowest, to go back to the lowest common denominator. And it is, we can call it the Walmart principle. And, it's just there. And people can see it or not and whatever. But I can see it. And, I hope that things change in some way that'll prevent this from happening in the future. And human beings will rise up, because that's, still a possibility. The opportunity is here, but whether human beings will take it or not, that's another story. And you can see this with somebody making this kind of a comment without really experiencing the transmission and not knowing what's going on. The amount of comments I get from people who don't know what's going on, but they think that they get it when they don't. They're not, aware of what I'm talking about. It's over their head. But they feel like they're going to tell everybody what's up, right? And, that's another problem with human beings. Okay, this is Thursday, October 5th. I'm about to finish this video up after I do this voiceover here. One thing I left out in talking about the Chris Webby Raw Thoughts 6 song. He has a line in that song, something like, we could easily overthrow these elites, or whatever he calls them. What happens after? I don't know. I'm just a rapper, or something like that, right? And that's the problem. That's the whole problem with the truth community, that there is a solution to what the truth community focuses on, which is to get rid of the power structure, right? Like, we're the anti-power structure people. We're the people saying the people in power are horrible people, demonic, satanic, Satan worshippers, or whatever, right? As bad as you could be. Those are people running the system. But what happens after? Like, if you took that group out, the system would collapse. The financial system, the illusion would collapse. And if it didn't collapse, you would have to play their role, which is to do evil to keep the system going, because the system runs on evil. I've said this over and over again. And that's our problem. And people who are here in the so-called truth community, you have to get to that place at some point where you realize that, the obvious solution is to remove the cancer, which is the people who run the system. I mean, it's, the cancer is all of us, really, so we're, used to remove humanity from the planet, because we're the ones we're the species that are screwing everything up for other species and ourselves, and self-sabotage and all. I mean, it's a people problem, and it doesn't, matter that you're better than, or you're not as bad as some of these, other people, that we're all part of that problem. But if you believe in God, you believe that there's a plan, and that if there's a problem, there's a correction, there's a solution. And the solution is, there have been saints, people who have reached the next level of whatever it is, some other level, maybe even beyond the next level. There's multiple levels where people can go up to very high levels of spiritual evolution and be selfless and be focused on serving God and all these things. If you had a society of those people who are saintly, people who are on a totally different level of their evolutionary achievement on a spiritual level, then all these problems would disappear because they're problems of ego and problems of selfishness. Ego is always the downfall of a human being. And ego is always what brings a person down. When they are disconnected from their soul, they're disconnected from everything, and your ego is always being destroyed. Like your ego feels threatened. People's who are egos, like Trump is a person whose ego is constantly being threatened. An ego-dominated, egocentric person. And he doesn't care what he does and who he involves. I mean, he's got these, like I said, you always have crazy people out there, and things are desperate right now. People are freaked out. So they don't need to be saturated with hate and fear and, used in a way. I mean, you have a responsibility for what you're putting out there to your audience, right? People are always, crazy people are out there, and people who are emotionally unstable. So remaining calm, especially when you're covering subject matter like I do here, or whatever it is that Trump's doing about Trump is talking about how the system's going to collapse. We're close to World War III, all these things that freak people out, and then to put it in ways where he says he's the only person who can do anything, and these people are stopping him, and like all these lies and stuff he's perpetrating on these poor desperate people, right? It's a really low thing. Like he's lower in many ways than some of these other scumbags, on the other side of the aisle, so to speak, because what he does to his supporters, people who will believe in him, what he's, putting them through, what he's using them for, he's really a scumbag. And some of those people are truthers, so it's like even, worse in that way. They are, some level of truther, at least. They're entertain some of these ideas on a right-wing, very immature level. But there is a solution, and that is people connect to God. That's why I say only spirituality will save this world and become better. Like, we have to become better. The only solution is for us to become better. Whatever pressure there is, whatever circumstances there that makes us have to do that is good for us. That God will bring a correction. There's, oftentimes the people think the problem generates the solution on a divine level. But it's just the opposite. The solution generates the problem. The solution is there. And so the problem has to occur to get people, to motivate people to accept the solution. And so whatever problem is being created now, post-apocalyptically, apocalyptically, all these things that I call it, whatever's happening in terms of collapse of our system, is happening to get people to accept the solution. And I know from my own experience, I mean, even what's recently happened with Dodgy and the Sajmarg method, which is a system that helps people become saintly, cleans out what's, that's preventing them from being a spiritual person, and then the transmission, which is an evolutionary force that can help people rise up to their better nature. We all have a better nature. We all have a higher nature. And people's unwillingness to embrace that higher nature is the problem, because the opportunities have been there. Like I was saying, how many people are out there who are really connected to God and are moving forward, and then they can sustain that movement without falling into some material addiction or something, material connection, and fall to a lower level, an egotistical level, a selfish level. So there's a solution, right? And then people's ability to embrace that solution, their higher nature. And we are very predisposed to go to our lower nature in a way that's, kind of scary. Like it's in the way that you see people do this in your life, people's addictions, their shortcomings, their self-sabotaging behavior when they, are going in the right direction. A person realizes, because motivations happen, like a drunk loses his family and his job and hits rock bottom and connects to God and goes to some 12-step kind of a program, group therapy, whatever, which isn't great, but it's, it helps him because he's motivated, right? He's motivated to change. People hit rock bottom and they find God. And then they realize their ego is whatever, and they start minimizing their ego, and they get disciplined in what their behavior is. And then they rebuild their lives. Like things start happening, things start going well for them again. They get a job, maybe even a better job, and maybe they get their family back, and whatever it is that happens. And then all of a sudden, boom, it happens again. And so, success is some of the worst, things for people. Like some people's success is, horrible for them. They spiral when they become successful. My parents separated later in life. I was in my 20s, and I just saw my dad as just a not a good person, not a villain or anything, but just somebody who was, he complained about his job constantly. He was a guidance counselor, and we moved we moved farther away. He used to be closer to his job, but we moved farther away. I was in high school, and he had to drive over this mountain, the mountain that led to this, sort of more rural town that we were living in. And he talked about, having to drive over it every day, the commute, and just, complained about it. I didn't like my dad, so I didn't care, whatever. But he went into his job, and then he retired. He had this, sort of retirement party, and he recorded it, and they were all doing sort of one of those old comedy roast kind of things, making fun of each other. I think the mayor was there. I don't know. My dad had his moment, and he tape recorded. He used to listen to the tape recording all the time, his retirement thing. But he didn't really have friends. He was, he didn't. He had a couple of friends from a long time back. But they were all aging out and whatever. People were dying. My parents as they got older. He was in his, late 60s, 70s, and he thought he was going to play golf, but he sucked at golf. And so he ended up just kind of going crazy and watching TV, and then he got irritable bowel syndrome and some other physical issues. And he was going on sort of rants, watching too much TV, and just being angry all the time. My mom was scared. My grandmother was 100, was scared. And they split up, and I wasn't there. They were in Florida. They didn't have any kids or any purpose. My dad had nothing really as to keep his life together. My mom called me, and she said she was freaked out all the time. He was just whatever. People who can't wait to retire, but they have nothing to retire to, and their job is the only thing keeping them going. You see people fall apart after they lose their jobs. That's a great thing about farming, because you just farm until you die, and you always have projects you can do. You always have maintenance on the farm and new things to do. That's one of the great things about that kind of lifestyle, because you always need work, and also doing spiritual work and things like that. You need work. You need some reason, something to fulfill. That's why people who retire and they're no longer valuable, and people aren't, their kids and grandkids don't seek them out for wisdom, because the kids and grandkids really don't like them. They don't respect them, and they, these nursing home things. They're a shame, right? There's the wealth of the elderly, the wisdom of the elderly, of people who lived successful lives. Being able to teach the younger generation doesn't exist. And it's a necessity. Remember, there's a Seinfeld episode where they were talking about the 1,500-mile zone, or whatever it was, family zone, for their parents are down in Florida, and they're in New York City, and they want to keep that, distance. And, people want that. They don't want to be close to their parents. They want to just have their obligatory visits and whatever. The parents are just... they have no purpose. They're just people sucking up resources, and my dad was terrified of dying. And so my mom was living in my grandmother's house. My grandmother's, they had a house there in Boca Raton. They retired to Boca Raton. And my dad called me up. He's like, and I was just not in a good space. This is before I found Sagemark. And then afterwards, it was that period of time. My dad called me up. I was in my late 20s, and I was engaged to this woman. She was a nurse, and we broke up, kind of thing like that. It was just, whatever I was doing at that time. And I was aware that people had to change, and I knew my dad had to change. And my mom and my dad called me like almost like little kid kind of things, and I'm like talking to him and saying, my dad's like, we got to get rid of these two houses. It was, he had a couple of times where he bought a house before selling the other house, and he stressed out. Like one time he did it, I wasn't, I was too young to even realize what was going on, but my brother told me about it, and then he did it, again. He bought a new house without selling the old one, and he was just so stressed out every day, carrying two mortgages, and just, it's not the way you do things. And it was kind of, whatever, cheap and fear-based. But he was like, Paul, we got to get rid of these two houses. I'm like, what was we, Like I was telling my wife that he had this uncanny ability to turn the wrong way on one-way roads. He had poor eyesight, but I don't know if it was that. But he would go into vacation areas, be somewhere where he wasn't usually going, and he would just make a panic decision. Like when I was a little kid, they had just paved the road, like one of those things where they laid down some tar, and my dad drove right over it. And these construction guys are waving their arms, and he's, it's a brand new road they've paved over, and he drove right. I don't know how even, there's cones and. Like he just did it. And we got home, and I looked at the back of the car, and there's, how like if you live in somewhere cold, you'll drive in the slush, wet ice kind of snow will accumulate behind a wheel. And it just sits there, and you're like, it was fun as a kid to kick it off, to knock it off the car. And he had that with tar, and like the tar was just solidified. So we had these chunks of tar on that car for like the life of the car, right? Just stupid stuff. And I was telling my wife this. He was, I think, pulling a trailer. He was pulling a trailer, and we were moving something. And I must have visited them in Florida, and I was a good driver, and I was young. And I was much more relaxed as a driver. Like I could see how tense he was when I got older. I'm like, oh my God, they're not good drivers. And now his eyes were going. And like, why'd you let me drive? He's like, no, so I'm sitting there, and we're pulling this trailer and moving something. And, it was two lanes going one way. It wasn't like a highway, but it was like one of those state road kind of, 45, 50 mile an hour road. And there was a medium between the oncoming traffic, and then there was another road on the side. Just, we were going to take a left and then go past the oncoming traffic. And then take a right. And there was nobody right there in the immediate oncoming traffic, but it was a busy road. And then he took a right onto the oncoming traffic. I'm like, what are you doing? And the oncoming traffic now is coming towards us, and we're heading for it, and they're going pretty fast. I'm like, how did you manage that, right? Like, how did you manage that? Like, you were there at the stoplight, and you had time to figure things out. It wasn't like a quick decision. And he's like, it's okay. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, you just let me drive, like. And so, another time when I was, before I was born, my three sisters were in the back, and they were going to visit my parents who were going from Connecticut to New Jersey. And my brother was there, they were all little kids, and I was not, I was born like late, years later. And they were going, in New Jersey, through New York, which are tough roads to drive in. They're tough for anybody. And the traffic and they're just horrible. It's a horrible place to drive. And they were going through a tunnel, and my dad ended up like going the wrong way through. I don't even know how he managed this. Like I wasn't there. And it was Easter Sunday, and my sisters were all dressed in like little hats and bonnets or whatever. And the cop is like, face is like beet red. He's like swearing at my dad as he walks up to the car. And my mom said he took a look at the kids and like, was like, whatever, they're going to see my dad's parents in New Jersey. Surprisingly, it was no treat either. But, there's just incompetence there. But anyway, so he calls me. He's like, Paul, we got to get rid of these two houses. And I'm like, why? Like, because he wanted to get back with my mom. And they were splitting up, and I was all for the divorce, right? because I'm like, he needed to change. Like I knew, whatever. And I'm like, why? And then I said, well, what's different about you now? You realize you have to change. What's different about you now? And he's like, lots of things. That was his answer. Like he had nothing else. I've changed lots of things, like a little kid, And I'm like, well, yeah, that's not going to work out. So I talked to my mom, but eventually she took him back. And then he deteriorated physically, and she deteriorated physically, but she still had to take care of him. We went to visit him. He was like a walking corpse. He couldn't see. He needed help going to the bathroom. His nurse came to like clean him up, and he'd just sit in his bed. And, he wasn't able to eat. He'd always loved to eat, but his digestion, it was just shot. And he was like down to nothing. He would always have a pot belly. He was kind of overweight when I was a kid. Now he's just like this walking corpse, right? Just a school, scared of dying, being kept alive by medications, but not really living. He couldn't see, so he couldn't watch TV. He couldn't eat. Like he had and nowhere. And then like my mom just was like, like I said, I was in their house and it was like 90 degrees. They turned the heat up to like 90 in Florida. Like they don't know they were somehow cold. Unless it was like almost body temperature levels. Their bodies couldn't produce heat. My dad was in one room watching the Marlins game, the Marlins baseball game, but he was only listening to it. And my mom was in the other room, her bedroom. I'm like, what kind of life is this? My kids were like happy. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to suffocate here. I'm like, it's dying. Like it brought me back to my childhood. But, it just wouldn't change, right? Like even then, for the end of his life, he did the meditation and he actually saw light one time, got scared. He did the Sajmark meditation. But, he couldn't prepare for death and he had just lived a fear-based, failure of a life, right? And, there's just no moving forward for him, right? And this is what the system does to people, of their own, participation. And they're not prepared. They're not prepared for, we're the least prepared people for death. People die poorly and are kept alive now by the medical system that extracts as much resources and wealth from the people as possible as they prolong these people's miserable end to their lives. Lonely, all of it, right? But I've had to think about this myself, right, for years. Being a counselor and then, just the way my mind works and then being a preceptor for Sajmark's system and then just seeing all these things and knowing people have to change. Like that's what you deal with when you work in the counseling world, and what's the motivation? What does it take people to change? What do they need to change? Like what do they need in their external world to force them to change? And it's growing to be something that's a bigger and bigger, whatever it is, like a slap in the face. And, to a point where the system has to come down, right? And then we'll see. Like, we don't know. Even then, people don't want to change. What I've dealt with the Sajmark system, Daji, and his heartfulness debacle. And seeing, the people around him and their inability to deal with this issue. To either see it, it's a more personal experience with the problem of sheeple and truthers, and even the truthers suck. And when the truthers were trying to manipulate me, the dodgy truthers, to be their voice or whatever, because people just behave in bad ways. They don't look at their own behavior and going, well, I'm lying right now, I'm manipulating, like naming the behaviors that they're doing. And so, I'm not a person who is very high on human nature. Like I wouldn't buy stock in human nature based on what I've seen. And it's the inability to accept, we're being warned right now and all the signs are there that we have to do something different. And, people have a sense of fear and desperation and feel the apocalypse coming. Apocalypse. And, not going to do anything. And that's, and the truth community exists as much or maybe even more than anywhere else because truthers know, just like people who do Sajmark know. They know something different, but they still know. And, there's basically warnings in the Sajmark literature and prophecies and things like this that people who do this and have faith in it would believe, and yet they ignore them, and all of it. And same thing with people in the truth community. And so maybe we're a little bit worse because of that, because sheeple have stuck their heads in the sand, and they at least can claim plausible deniability, but it isn't going to help them on a spiritual level, because they've chosen to be oblivious to the messages and the warnings that they're getting from the divine hierarchy, the beings that are managing this planet, that are saying you got to turn this thing around. And it's not happening. And so the inevitable is being slapped in the face with the reality of a collapsing system, or a collapse system, and then having to muster up the gumption. I heard this word in a show yesterday. The gumption to do something about it. But the solution's there. You minimize your ego. You accept that this is happening. You're not a victim. We're not victims. We've all created this. We accept the collapse for what it is, and we do better when change. And and until people do that, nothing's going to happen. Like, there's going to be no positive outcome. It might take 100 years and multiple generations before people will do that, or maybe they won't do it at all. But they're not going to do it now, and that's pretty obvious. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day, and be grateful.